and welcome to the North Dakota Training Academy for Addiction Professionals. My name is Beth Strout-Mingy, and today I will be providing a training module on Introduction to Clinical Supervision. The learning objectives will be to develop an understanding of the foundation for clinical supervision, to understand the responsibilities of the clinical supervisor, and to become aware of resources needed for effective clinical supervision. Most agencies in North Dakota have faced a workforce shortage. In the field of substance use disorder or behavioral health, it's incumbent upon us to develop a quality, knowledgeable workforce. In order to accomplish this, we need competent, experienced clinical supervisors who act as gatekeepers to the future of our behavioral health workforce. You're a bridge between what individuals learn in the classroom and the application of that knowledge in a clinical setting. By you providing quality supervision, we're able to improve client care. We can develop professionalism of clinical personnel, and we can impart and maintain ethical standards for our field. So welcome to the Introduction to Clinical Supervision. I'm assuming you're watching this training module as you prepare to supervise and train new workers. I'm hoping that many of you are pursuing this because you see a need for additional workers in our field, because you received great training and wanted to pay it forward. But my guess is many of you are entering it out of pressure from your agency because you simply do not have enough workers for your present or future workload. This training program will hopefully help you develop the knowledge and skills necessary to be a quality clinical supervisor. As a clinical supervisor, you'll be called upon to be a teacher, a coach, a consultant, a mentor, an evaluator, and in my world, a cheerleader. You'll find yourself needing to support and encourage your trainee while addressing not only the issues of your trainee, but also ensuring that your clients are receiving the highest quality care. Most of us are familiar with SAMHSA's tips and guidelines. They have 8 core principles for effective clinical supervision, all rooted in the primary goal of delivering high quality client care. Well, this is achieved by upholding high standards and providing consistent guidance. To understand this, you must realize supervision is a relationship-centered relationship. To achieve this by upholding high standards and providing consistent guidance. To understand this, you must realize supervision is relationship-centered. It's built on trust, mutual respect, and strong interpersonal connections. I must stress to you to approach your role with cultural competence and ethical integrity while ensuring that every interaction is guided by awareness and sensitivity. Your connection with your trainee includes you being authentic and appropriate use of humor. And I mean that very, very truly, that humor is something that can really help build a relationship with your trainee because it helps create a safe and supportive environment, can lighten the load, and help with some of the stress regulation. Regular direct observation and timely specific feedback are essential to fostering trainee development. A structured, consistent approach using recognized models of counseling and supervision enhances learning and accountability. Most importantly, you must prioritize and model self-care to remain effective and sustainable in your role as a clinical supervisor. Finally, you serve as an advocate for your agency, your trainees, your clients, and the broader field of substance use treatment. For many of us, how we were trained will impact how we approach training individuals ourselves. We'll take from our experience what was positive, what was helpful, and what we liked about our training, But also some of us have been impacted by some less desirable experiences. We need to acknowledge our past experience as we move forward in developing our styles and methods to training individuals. If you had a particularly difficult or dissatisfying training experience, it's worth your time and energy to reflect on the good and bad experience, how that will impact how you approach others, and it's incumbent upon you to speak with your peers about the impact of that experience and seek guidance and support as you enter into this endeavor of clinical training. Clinical supervision is a skill and a new knowledge base which we need to develop. Remember, you don't have to know everything or do everything perfectly. When you don't know something, it's a great opportunity to role model how to investigate an issue, showing your trainee resources available and how to reach out to your peers or others for input, consultation, or suggested resources. The purpose of clinical supervision is to support the trainee in developing the skills, knowledge, and understanding necessary for effective clinical practice. This is achieved through reflection on their experiences, client interactions, and treatment outcomes. Clinical supervision also helps trainees recognize and manage their reactions to the emotional intensity of their work, while providing quality oversight to ensure that services are ethical, appropriate, and clinically sound. Finally, supervision fosters the trainee's ability to understand and regulate their own emotional responses, promoting professional growth and resilience. Anyone pursuing a new endeavor always wants to be successful and ensure good quality. By approaching clinical supervisor training, we want to ensure that our clients are well served, but also that we are pursuing knowledge and skills based on evidence-based practices that we can convey to our trainees to increase their skills, which in turn means better overall care and treatment for our clients. As you enter into this new endeavor, it's critical that you understand by taking on this responsibility, you must make your trainee and your training sessions a priority. This is difficult because we are already stretched for time and now we must find a balance. Well, let's take a look at it. What is clinical supervision? According to SAMHSA, supervision is a social influence process that occurs over time in which the supervisor works collaboratively with trainees to ensure the delivery of high-quality clinical care. Effective supervisors observe, mentor, coach, evaluate, and inspire, while creating an environment that fosters self-motivation, learning, and professional development. You build strong teams, promote cohesion, resolve conflict, and help shape agency culture, all while consistently attending to ethical standards and diversity considerations. This type of supervision is essential to both quality improvement and the successful implementation of consensus and evidence-based practices. Bernard and Goodyear's definition is supervision is a structured, ongoing process in which a senior professional provides guidance and oversight to a junior member or members of the same profession. This evaluative relationship supports the professional growth and effectiveness of the trainee, ensures the quality and safety of services provided to clients, and serves a gatekeeping role by determining readiness and suitability for continued practice within the profession. The bottom line, clinical supervision is the vehicle in which trainees can acquire knowledge and skills in the SUD and behavioral health treatment profession. It's a bridge between what individuals learn in the classroom and the application in a clinical setting. Quality supervision is critical to our field. It allows us to improve client care, develop professionalism in our workforce, and impart and maintain ethical standards. You'll find yourself needing to support, encourage, and educate your trainees while addressing emotional, interpersonal, and possibly physical and spiritual issues not only for your clients, but also your trainees. In the long run, quality clinical supervision ensures that clients are competently served. Sum it up, it really involves you as a clinical supervisor meeting regularly and consistently with your trainee to further their knowledge, skill, and guide them to ensure that they provide quality care to our clients. No one should enter into clinical supervision without the experience necessary to determine what is in the best interest for our clients. That means that you must have a mastery of skills on various treatment approaches, treatment goals, and strategies, an understanding of various levels of care, and finally, evidence-based practices. The state of North Dakota requires a minimum of 20 hours of education specifically geared to clinical supervision, and much of that should include specific training on clinical supervisory methods. One of the biggest factors in a successful training experience is the relationship between you and your trainee. The clinical supervisor-trainee relationship or training alliance is a foundation for a fruitful training experience. It must be built on mutual respect, on very clear expectations by both parties, an understanding of the authority of the clinical supervisor, and accountability of both parties. By entering into any training relationship, it's important to begin with personal reflection. This includes clarifying your role as a clinical supervisor and considering how you will model and explain your approach to supervision. Reflect on how your training will impact how you train another individual, and seek input from others as you start to define your role and expectations. So, what does good supervision look like? Well, let's start with your initial meeting with your trainee. I recommend that you come to the initial meeting and all other sessions with a structured agenda. Without an agenda, it's difficult to stay focused and evaluate if you accomplished your goals for the session. This also role models organization for your trainee. Setting an agenda for a supervisory meeting ensures structure, focus, and effective use of time. A well-organized agenda allows both you and your trainee to address key issues, review progress, and set goals collaboratively. So, start by identifying the purpose of the meeting, such as, is it a case review? Is it skill development, performance evaluation, or addressing specific concerns? Invite your trainee to suggest topics or areas they wish to discuss, fostering collaboration and ensuring their needs are addressed. Prioritize topics. Arrange items by importance, starting with critical issues such as client safety, ethical concerns, or pressing challenges, and then include routine items. Allocate time for standard updates like caseload reviews, skill development goals, and ongoing projects. Take into account time allocation. Assign approximate time slots to each agenda item to ensure the meeting stays on track. Then close with a review. End by summarizing key points, decisions, and next steps to clarify expectations for both parties. I think this is really important because you want to check with your trainee to make sure that their perspective on the meeting or on the training session matches yours. You want to know if their perception is the same as yours, or did they misinterpret something that you said? Are they left with more questions or concerns? An effective agenda aligns with the goals of supervision, supports professional growth, and reinforces the partnership between you and your trainee. So again, I strongly recommend you come to each session with an agenda so you both know what to expect and what to accomplish during that meeting. During that initial meeting, with your trainee, you can start by sharing your experience, your education, your training, and what model of supervision you will be utilizing. Ask the same of your trainee for them to share their education, their work experience, their life experiences, and any life issues or experiences they may have encountered which would shape how they approach working with clients. This is critical information for you to have because it will impact your expectations and the responsibilities you give your trainee. Include expectations for supervision, how often, how you'll provide feedback, and the need for two-way communication and feedback. Be sure to clearly identify and schedule regular supervisory session times, emphasizing the importance of consistency. Consistent scheduling helps establish structure, it supports accountability, and it ensures that supervision is predictable, reliable, and effective for both the supervisor as well as your trainee. Discuss your expectations as a clinical supervisor, as well as your expectations of the trainee. Clearly outline what the trainee should bring to each supervisory session and communicate what areas you'll be focusing on together. Supervision should be the designated time for a trainee to raise concerns or problems, discuss fears or uncertainty about how to approach a situation, and process emotional reactions to clients or clinical experiences. As you develop your supervisory relationship, it's critical that both you and your trainee have a shared understanding of expectations and responsibilities. Without this clarity, frustration can arise when one party holds expectations the other is unaware of. So openly discussing expectations and formally documenting them helps prevent misunderstandings, reduces conflicts, and creates a more effective and supportive supervision process. But also have your trainees share their expectations of you, the clinical supervisor, and their role as a trainee. It's important for the trainee to understand that each clinical supervisor brings unique experiences, perspectives, and therapeutic approaches to the supervision process. Rather than seeing these differences as obstacles, trainees should view them as valuable learning opportunities. Exposure to various modalities and styles can support them in developing their own clinical voice and therapeutic identity. Supervision is a collaborative relationship, and a supervision contract can reflect that by including input from both the clinical supervisor and the trainee. Together, you can outline your expectations, preferences, and goals for supervision, including how to address concerns if the supervisory relationship is not going well. Be sure and discuss the trainee's goals for training and goals for supervision. Have the trainee identify what they want to learn in their training experience with you. Is there a certain type of therapy or strategy they want to know about? What goals have they already accomplished? And what do they want to accomplish in this rotation? Be sure to include these in your training contract. Are they realistic and are they achievable? Setting up goals for clinical training involves a structured process to ensure that trainees develop the necessary skills, knowledge, and professional behaviors that they need as a professional. So let's take a second to review that process. It starts with assessing the training needs. Evaluate your trainee's current level of knowledge, skills, and experience, and then identify areas for growth based on your clinical training program's objectives and competency requirements. Take a look at their competencies. These are outlined in TAAP 21A to ensure the goals reflect core competencies in counseling, ethics, client care, and other key areas. Collaborate with your trainee by including the discussion on how to make goals specific, relevant, and meaningful. Don't forget to identify short and long-term goals. Create immediate goals for mastering foundational skills and knowledge, and then establish long-term goals for more advanced competencies, including professional identity and autonomy. Once you have the goals established, you can create action plans, break down each goal into actionable steps with timelines. To assist with this, you can assign resources such as reading materials, attending workshops, or hands-on experience with you as a clinical supervisor observing. Don't forget to incorporate feedback mechanisms for evaluating progress on the various goals. So include regular opportunities for observation, as well as trainee self-assessment, and then your supervisor feedback. Be open to revising these goals based on the trainee's evolving needs, challenges, and achievements. And of course, tailor goals to specific clinical populations, culture, or areas of focus. Lastly, make sure that you document the progress being made. Review the goals regularly and adjust goals in supervisory meetings. This approach ensures a comprehensive trainee-centered development plan that fosters both professional growth and high-quality client care. Discuss the trainee's scope of practice. A trainee's scope of practice refers to the boundaries within which they are permitted to perform clinical duties based on their education, training, level of experience, and application of knowledge and skills. For instance, a first rotation trainee may focus on basic tasks like conducting assessments, gathering case histories, or observing sessions, while an advanced trainee may independently lead therapy sessions under supervision. Understanding and respecting this scope is essential for ensuring ethical and effective care while safeguarding both the trainee as well as your client. You and your trainee should jointly explore the trainee's scope of practice. This is essential to ensure the trainee does not assume responsibilities beyond their current level of preparation or competence. If the trainee has previously trained at another site or worked under a different clinical supervisor, review past evaluations together with your trainee, including their competency ratings. All tasks assigned to a trainee must be approved and closely overseen by a licensed clinical supervisor who's responsible for ensuring the trainee does not function beyond their scope of competence. Allowing a trainee to practice outside of their abilities can compromise client care and result in ethical or legal violations. Trainees are permitted to complete assigned tasks and responsibilities with expectations that these increase gradually as competence and experience develop. It's important to clearly review prohibited or limited activities. Trainees must not make independent clinical diagnoses or develop treatment plans without supervisory oversight. Use therapeutic techniques for which they're not trained or certified, such as EMDR or trauma-focused CBT. Or provide services outside the approved facility or supervisory arrangement without explicit authorization. Open and ongoing communication between you and your trainee is essential for addressing uncertainties, clarifying boundaries, and responsibly expanding the trainee's scope of practice. You should consistently model ethical decision-making and reinforce the importance of professional boundaries. As trainees develop their skills, you should encourage progressive responsibility, offer opportunities for skill building, and guide trainees toward achieving the competencies required for independent practice. A clinical trainee's scope of practice is a dynamic framework that evolves with education, skill development, and supervision. Clear communication, adherence to legal and ethical standards, and strong supervisory support are critical to maintaining appropriate boundaries while fostering professional growth. It's important for both of you to understand that prior ratings on their evaluations and competency ratings do not automatically translate to the same level of functioning in a new setting or with a new clinical supervisor. The approach and direct observation by you, the clinical supervisor, will depend on the experience of your trainee. The less experience, the less competent, the more didactic and involved you need to be. If an individual scores a 1 on any core area, you will have to have direct intervention time and supervision time with that trainee. It's important that the trainee understand that each supervisor has different experiences, approaches, and modalities that they use. So help your trainee to understand the opportunity that can give them by observing various approaches and modalities as they develop their own therapy style. Competency must be continually assessed within the context of your program, your client population, and your expectations as a supervisor. A rating assigned by another evaluator, such as a 3 and them being competent, does not guarantee that that trainee is performing at that level in your environment. Ongoing evaluation and clinical judgment are necessary to accurately determine and support the trainee's current level of competency. Remember, when you're talking about feedback with your trainee, that it's bidimensional. What I mean by that is that you continually give feedback to your trainee, as well as ask the trainee to give you feedback on how the training is progressing and their comfort level with the training process. Supervision should include a discussion of the methods and opportunities for bidirectional feedback, including when feedback will be provided immediately, such as following an observed session, if there's clinical concerns or skill development is needed, versus during scheduled feedback times, such as your weekly supervision meetings or formal evaluations. Both you and your trainee should identify how you prefer to give feedback and how you prefer to receive feedback, and what supports psychological safety and learning during feedback conversations. At the end of each supervision session, time should be allotted to process that feedback that was exchanged. This includes clarifying, understanding, and addressing any emotional responses, if needed, and checking for alignment or potential misperceptions. I really want to stress that because trainees might be defensive, might be so nervous that they don't accurately hear the feedback that you are giving them, and they might misperceive what you are trying to teach them. So always, always double check, what did they hear, what was their perception, and was it accurate? There should always be written documentation completed by both you, the clinical supervisor, as well as your trainee. This documentation should include a brief check-in to confirm whether the feedback was understood accurately and whether any misinterpretations occurred, allowing for clarification and course correction when needed. As trust is developed, hopefully sessions will become much more comfortable. You need to understand that there will be a certain level of anxiety regarding this from both of you, the clinical supervisor, as well as your trainee. Your trainee is going to want to be successful and going to want to please you. And as a result, if there isn't a trusting relationship, they're not going to share with you some of the difficulties that they may be having. Their fears or questions that they have, because they want to please you, they may not be willing to share those with you. And of course, that also depends on self-confidence that you as a clinical supervisor have, as well as your trainee. Your approach and level of direct observation will be based on the trainee's level of experience and competence. Trainees with less experience typically require more structured, didactic feedback and you will need to take a more active role in their development. Feedback will need to be more concrete with a lot of examples. Discuss evaluation expectations, including components of an evaluation, the time for completion, the review of the forms, any grievances, etc. Your evaluation should include evaluating their competence to ensure that the trainee possesses the necessary knowledge, skill, and attitudes to provide safe and effective care. Identify growth areas, pinpoint strengths and areas needing improvement to guide professional development. Ensure ethical practice, and monitor adherence to ethical and legal standards in their clinical practice. And enhance self-awareness. Always encourage the trainee to reflect on their own practices, biases, as well as areas for improvement. Discuss boundaries, including self-disclosure. I will say this in a number of the training modules, and that is boundaries is an area that comes up all of the time as a difficult issue for clinical supervisors as well as trainees. A discussion on boundaries is important. It's one of the more difficult areas for trainees, as I said, because they want to please you, they want to help others, and they don't want conflict. They just want to please. An area in which many trainees need guidance and role modeling includes self-disclosure, particularly with life experiences. Boundaries with self-disclosure by counselors are essential to maintain professionalism, safeguard the therapeutic relationship, and promote the client and trainee's best interests. Self-disclosure should be intentional and serve a therapeutic purpose, such as building rapport, normalizing client experiences, or modeling healthy behavior. It must always prioritize the client's needs over the trainee's desire to share. Disclosure should be limited to what is necessary and appropriate for the therapeutic context. Avoid oversharing personal details that could shift the focus from the client to the trainee or you, the supervisor. Excessive or irrelevant self-disclosure can blur boundaries and risk creating dual relationships or dependency. So help your trainee reflect on their motivations for self-disclosure and assess whether it benefits the therapeutic process. Self-awareness helps ensure that the disclosure is not driven by the trainee's personal needs or unresolved issues. So help them understand there can be risks and consequences to sharing. Poorly timed or unnecessary self-disclosure can undermine the client's trust. It can shift the focus of the therapy or make the client feel uncomfortable. As a clinical supervisor, self-disclosure is something that you'll need to role model for your trainee. Oftentimes, individuals get into situations in which they want to share some of their past situations. Well, there's times when sharing personal or professional information with the trainee is appropriate, and there's other times when it isn't. This will serve as a learning opportunity for you, clinical supervisor, to model appropriate behavior, as well as to teach and coach your trainee. Be mindful of what you choose to share, because trainees may not always use that information in the way that you intend. In some cases, it could be used against you or shared inappropriately with others. Therefore, be very deliberate and thoughtful about when, where, and how you self-disclose, and encourage your trainee to do the same. By balancing transparency and professionalism, you can use self-disclosure effectively while maintaining ethical boundaries and fostering a safe and supportive therapeutic environment. Again, as a clinical supervisor, role model good boundaries, including not giving out your cell phone number, not working outside of work hours, not being on call all of the time, not giving clients rides, etc. Always maintain clear boundaries. Continually reiterate to your trainee that the supervisory relationship is indeed a professional relationship. Boundaries can become blurred for supervisors and trainees as you're operating in a position of authority. Remember that the only things that you can ethically offer your trainee are supervision services, resources, and referrals. If you have to confront an issue with your trainee, I can tell you it's much more difficult when you have a personal relationship with them. Also, you can share with them some things which are inappropriate, such as gifts, providing them transportation or shelter unless already arranged through the training consortium. Though positive rapport is necessary, be careful not to become a friend, parental figure, or romantic partner to your trainee. Buying or selling anything to your trainee is also an ethical concern. Partnering with your trainee in any kind of a business venture is unethical and imposing your beliefs, whether religious, political, or otherwise. Something new to clinical supervision is having to deal with the issue of social media. For many clinical supervisors, I'm not sure that they've ever had to address the problems or concerns regarding social media, but I do believe that it is a boundary issue. It can be a boundary issue between you, the clinical supervisor, and the trainee, but also the trainee and clients. To start the discussion, I recommend that you introduce your facility's policies and procedures regarding social media. A discussion needs to occur on the boundaries and how they can be blurred on social media. One rule of thumb that I always use when talking to anybody, but particularly my kids, is never post anything on social media that you would not want printed on the front page of the hometown newspaper. I believe that trainees should not befriend any clients on social media, and you as a clinical supervisor should not befriend your trainees. One thing to consider is if you're on social media and your friends on social media, you may see or hear more information about an individual than you want to know. So then it becomes an issue of what's appropriate for you to deal with as a clinical supervisor. It's also a safety issue in that if you're a trainee or you have befriended a client, some of your privacy is lost. And we'll talk in future modules about how you stay safe in an environment nowadays which can be quite combative and explosive. So the bottom line is I recommend you discuss with your trainee boundaries regarding social media for yourselves and your working relationship, but also your trainee and clients. Trainees may not fully understand or consistently apply confidentiality standards such as HIPAA or 42 CFR Part 2. There can be misunderstandings about what information from supervision can be shared outside the supervisory relationship, and or managing confidentiality in group supervision or multidisciplinary teams. So provide thorough training on confidentiality laws and regulations, including their application in specific clinical scenarios. Set clear boundaries by explicitly communicating what information from client sessions can and cannot be shared and with whom. Incorporate role-playing exercises that simulate confidentiality dilemmas, allowing trainees to practice appropriate responses in a safe learning environment. Additionally, teach proper documentation practices to ensure client interactions are accurately recorded while maintaining confidentiality. We will discuss confidentiality and 42 CFR regulations and details in other training modules. However, your trainee has a right to know who you will be sharing information with regarding their trainee. When sharing information, always be respectful of your trainee and their learning experience. Allow them to make mistakes and use those moments as opportunities for growth and learning. Be deliberate and thoughtful about how and with whom you'll share information about their training. It's important to have an open discussion with your trainee about who will receive information and in what manner, such as training consortium members, directors, or treatment program administration. Remember, trust is the foundation of a strong supervisory relationship, and respecting your trainees' experience fosters that trust. Ensuring that they feel safe and respected in the sharing of information is essential for developing a positive, effective training relationship. As you and your trainee develop your working relationship, personal issues regarding your trainee will most likely occur. So it's very important that they understand and you have a discussion regarding supervision versus therapy versus friendship. Remember, you are not there to provide therapy for your trainee, but rather to teach, coach, and mentor them. At times, it will be appropriate to refer them for some type of mental health counseling, but it is not your responsibility to provide that. The only time that it would be appropriate for you to intervene is if their behavior or counseling sessions impact the client. Also, you are not there to be their friend. This boundary can be uncomfortable if you become a friend rather than a supervisor, and you have to confront them on some of their behavior or give them an unfavorable score. And we'll discuss this more in detail in other training modules and address the issue of dual relationships. But keep that in mind as you're introducing yourself to your trainee. As you work with your trainee, you will need to role model legal and ethical behavior. Ethical dilemmas frequently arise in counseling sessions, and it's important to provide a safe environment where your trainee can explore these conflicts. This environment should support the development of problem solving and critical thinking skills for handling such situations. Encourage your trainee to consistently seek guidance from supervisors and peers when facing ethical dilemmas, and help them recognize situations where consultation with legal counsel may be necessary. Trainees have a very limited understanding of legal and ethical standards in clinical practice, which can increase the risk of ethical breaches, such as engaging in dual relationships or failing to report mandated information. To address this, it's important to incorporate legal and ethical training into your supervision sessions. Use case studies to analyze ethical dilemmas and discuss appropriate courses of action, and maintain an ongoing dialogue by regularly reviewing legal and ethical standards during supervision. Encourage trainees to stay informed by attending licensing board meetings and following relevant legislation. Provide access to reference materials such as ethical codes from NADAC or NASW or ACA, and applicable legal guidelines, and create a supportive environment where trainees feel comfortable asking questions and seeking clarification on legal and ethical concerns. But most importantly, create a sharing, safe, and supportive environment. I've said it earlier, one of the biggest predictors for successful quality workforce is the development of a good working relationship with a clinical supervisor. This cannot occur without a trusting, safe, and supportive environment. So take time regularly to reflect on the working relationship with your trainee. And are there any ways to continue to grow and improve that relationship? Trainees may feel intimidated or hesitant to share challenges or mistakes, and without psychological safety, opportunities for growth and honest reflection are limited. To foster a supportive learning environment, normalize learning from mistakes by reframing errors as opportunities for growth rather than failures. Provide constructive, specific, and non-judgmental feedback, and involve trainees in setting goals and developing solutions to encourage collaboration. Don't forget to celebrate their successes, because that helps to build confidence and motivation, and prioritize listening over speaking during supervision sessions. Recognize that your preferred treatment modality may differ from theirs, and as long as trainees are practicing legally, ethically, and without causing harm to clients, allow them the space to explore approaches so that they can develop their own clinical judgment. Well, all of this becomes the outline for your training contract with you and your trainee. It's a clear discussion of what the clinical supervisor's role is and a clear discussion of what the role and expectations are for the trainee. If supervision is not happening or not going well, we need to go back and review the original contract, particularly what it said on expectations for supervision. I highly recommend that you and your trainee have a set date and time in which supervision takes place each week. If the relationship is broken, it's the responsibility of you, the clinical supervisor, to address it. It can include a conversation on the value of the working relationship, on how each individual perceives the working relationship, perhaps you talking with peers and getting suggestions on strategies for working with the individual and determining what the problems are. Remember, it's important that you make it a safe environment for them to make errors, to question, and to observe and learn from mistakes. As a new trainee, I wanted to please my supervisor. I was new to the field and I had no idea what I was doing, but I wanted to succeed. And of course, I wanted to do everything perfectly. I worked very hard to put in extra hours. I did everything I was told to do. And in my first review session, my supervisor said I did everything perfectly. I worked hard. I didn't make any mistakes. And then he said, and that was really too bad because I didn't learn anything new. He pointed out to me that some of the most meaningful learning experiences can occur through making mistakes. And when we do not allow individuals the safety net of making a mistake, at times we're cheating them out of a learning experience. So please give your trainee permission to make mistakes, to question what's right, what's wrong, to question why we do things the way we do, and that no question is a stupid question. So let's move on to what skills are necessary for clinical supervisors. In the past, many clinical supervisors were chosen simply because of the amount of time they had spent in the field, the number of years of experience, and the level of their education. Presently, clinical supervisors are accountable in ways that have never been faced before, including the demands for cost containment. There's an expectation that our experienced clinicians not only will be clinical supervisors, but will carry higher caseloads. As a result, we've needed to develop innovative ways to provide treatment as well as clinical supervision. Clinical supervisors are tasked with carefully monitoring the treatment services provided by a trainee in an effort to seek assurance that service delivery is maximized at each treatment opportunity. We conduct clinical supervision for the protection of clients. In the supervisory sessions, the clinical supervisor should reflect on the work they're undertaking with another experienced clinical supervisor. It's paramount that you cannot be a clinical supervisor if you do not have the clinical experience yourself. It's a purpose of supporting continual learning and development of the trainee, and it gives a degree of protection not only for the trainee, but also the client. The functions of clinical supervision include to help the trainee develop the skills, understanding, and knowledge necessary for clinical work by reflecting on their practice, to help the trainee become aware of and deal with their reactions to the emotional intensity of their work, and to provide quality control for the work that the trainee does, ensuring that the work is appropriate and ethical. And finally, to help them develop the skills for dealing with their own emotions and reaction. In the field of behavioral health, because of workforce shortage, oftentimes many of us are crunched for time. That's why strong time management skills are critical. And I really want to emphasize that. We are so busy. It is very critical that we have good time management skills, and we teach that to our trainees, because I have seen a number of trainees that had really poor time management skills. They came to sessions unprepared. They had no idea what the most important task was, and they were lost. And as a result, they fell behind and they did not benefit from all of the learning opportunities. Effective strategies for time management include setting both short and long-term goals and ensuring those goals follow the SMART criteria. That is, that they're specific, they're measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Once you've accomplished one, don't forget to give yourself credit when you've accomplished them. Effective planning involves being intentional and efficient with your daily schedule, including reviewing meetings in advance and evaluating whether attending each one is necessary. Equally important is sticking to your schedule. Assertiveness plays a role in time management as it allows you to set boundaries and say no when participation is not essential, ensuring your time is used productively and purposefully. Managing technology thoughtfully, such as limiting distractions from emails, notifications, or social media, helps maintain focus and productivity. I think this is something, again, when you're talking time management, that you really need to focus on. How many people are walking around with their phones and texting, buying stuff online, doing all sorts of things with their phones? The same is true with their computer. They're sitting in front of their computer. However, are they doing client documentation, or are they surfing the net? Take a look at how you manage your technology. Are you wasting time with a lot of irrelevant emails? Take a look at how you can curtail some of the time that you're spending just wasting on technology. Setting clear boundaries is equally important, including minimizing interruptions during focused work periods or supervision sessions. Utilizing time blocking strategies, such as reserving dedicated time each week for supervision. It ensures consistent attention to your trainee and the trainee's development while balancing other responsibilities. It's also important to schedule breaks for yourself and your trainee to promote reflection, reduce burnout, and maintain engagement. Get up from your desk and walk around. That's part of your wellness program. Taken all together, these strategies create a structured and intentional approach to managing time, fostering both personal efficiency and supportive learning. Prioritization. Again, in these busy times, it's essential to be intentional about how we manage our time and responsibilities. And that means regularly assessing what needs to be accomplished within a specific time frame and making thoughtful decisions about what it takes to tackle that. To prioritize what needs to happen first. Prioritizing often involves focusing on the most time-sensitive or high-impact tasks rather than simply checking off quick, easy ones. And importantly, effective time management sometimes requires setting boundaries, including the ability to say no when necessary. Communication skills, and we'll talk at great lengths throughout all of the training modules about good communication skills. But as you prepare as a clinical supervisor, it's important that you be able to delineate your goals, your plans, and your expectations both to your supervisor as well as your trainee. Also, it's important that you communicate these issues in a timely manner. If you wait too long to discuss issues in teaching moments, the learning curve may be lost. So as you approach opportunities for learning, processing, and effective communication with your trainee, it's important to communicate on multiple levels to ensure clarity and understanding. This includes verbal communication, where you clearly articulate directives, expectations, and instructions. Complement verbal explanations by putting information in writing, which allows your trainee to reference material later, and it reinforces learning. And finally, equally important is demonstration, particularly when teaching a new skill, a treatment modality, or a clinical strategy. This can involve modeling the behavior yourself, engaging in role-playing exercises, or switching roles to allow the trainee to practice in a safe and guided setting. By combining verbal explanation, written guidance, and active demonstration, you create a multifaceted approach that enhances comprehension, retention, and practical application, ultimately supporting your trainees' development and confidence in their clinical work. When we work with any individuals, there is going to be conflict. Some trainees will be conflict resistant, some will engage in conflict on a regular basis, and some will be traumatized by conflict. You're susceptible to conflict. How do you manage it? Remember, you're a role model on how to effectively deal with disagreements or differing perceptions and experiences. How do you incorporate different backgrounds, cultures, personalities, and opinions? You are going to have to navigate it with staff and trainees. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but as a clinical supervisor, you're going to encounter a power differential, particularly if there's an age difference. You have a lot more experience, expertise, and clinical responsibility. And as a result, there's a power differential, and at times it may create a conflict in your relationship. The trainee has to understand that. And you, the clinical supervisor, need to remember that the trainee always wants to prove themselves. They want to keep the clinical supervisor on their good side because they need their approval. And that makes it difficult for them to bring up problem issues, to disagree with the clinical supervisor or not ask for help when they need it. If they don't address it to you in person, you got to remember it may come out in other ways that may be more difficult and more difficult to identify as well as deal with. Conflict can occur because of poor communication, which leads to misunderstanding, different points or perspectives, opinions, perceptions of unfairness or inequality. Hoping it'll go away just doesn't work. It just delays it, or worse, it grows. And it takes on a life of its own. So it's your responsibility to deal with it, or it can become disruptive. It can divert your attention and your energy. Conflict management is the incorporation of successful problem-solving techniques, including de-escalation, empathy, listening. So a simple 3-step formula for conflict resolution can include: the first step is engaging with the other person respectfully. Secondly, listen fully until you experience their side. And then finally, verbalize your feelings and views and the need to collaborate. If this doesn't work, always remember to seek out help when you need it. Look to your peers, look to your supervisors. Critical thinking is a skill that can help you solve problems. Critical thinking is the ability to interpret, evaluate, and analyze facts and information that are available to form a judgment or decide if something is right or wrong. To be a critical thinker, you make connections between logical ideas to see the bigger picture. Building your critical thinking skills means being able to advocate your ideas and opinions, present them in a logical manner, and make decisions for improvement. Included in critical thinking skills is the identification of biases. By researching details and facts, it can allow you to make a better, more logical, informed decision. Becoming more open-minded and increasing your problem-solving skills can assist you to handle challenges, avoid misinformation, and demonstrate leadership through constructive conversations while using logical and objective approaches to promote growth, competence, and confidence. Gather facts and data to evaluate each situation. Remember, your position must be unbiased, so ask relevant questions to ensure you have accurate information and data. Assess the data and outcomes objectively. Then communicate your thoughts and conclusions concretely, distinctly, and respectfully. Don't forget to evaluate your decisions. Did it work? Not work? What can be learned from the situation? And then identify ways to improve. Assessment. Well, this is ongoing. So continually assess your comfort with clinical supervision, how your relationship with your trainee is progressing, how the trainee is progressing on identified goals, how the client is progressing with work with the trainee. Assessment by a clinical supervisor is an integral part of the supervision process, aimed at ensuring the trainee's professional growth, competency, and delivery of quality care. It involves evaluating multiple aspects of the trainee's knowledge, skills, attitudes, and behaviors in relation to their clinical work. Assessment by a clinical supervisor is not merely a means of evaluation, but a collaborative process aimed at fostering growth, accountability, and excellence in clinical practice. By adopting a structured, transparent, and supportive approach, you can guide trainees effectively while ensuring high standards of client care. Reflecting on the kind of clinical supervisor you want to be is essential for effective supervision. This means examining your approach, perspectives, and the progression of your supervisory practice. Without such reflection, you risk approaching your trainee with preconceived ideas, experiences, and a fixed lens that may limit your understanding of their learning needs. Failing to consider your supervisory style, knowledge, assumptions, or even biases can result in missing critical information that could support and guide your trainee's development. By engaging in regular self-reflection, you can identify areas for growth and explore ways to become a more effective, thoughtful, and responsive supervisor. So let's explore some effective components of clinical supervision. We'll start with listening. This is a skill in which you stay focused and demonstrate an understanding and response to the trainee. You want to show that you have empathy and that you can communicate and support positive change through focused listening. Active listening means being fully present when you are conversing with your trainee. The main goal of active listening is to allow the trainee to feel safe and comfortable enough to share their thoughts. Avoid any distractions and stay focused. Show that you're practicing active listening by limiting potential distractions. Use supportive, nonverbal cues such as eye contact. Smile. Be consistent in your body language, but ensure that it is non-judgmental. Paraphrase what they've said so that you're sure that you heard them correctly and to show them that you're interested in what they're saying. Use recall of previously shared information which is appropriate and relevant to the conversation. Observation is a foundation of clinical supervision, serving to establish the trainee's knowledge and skills while providing the supervisor with opportunities for ongoing support and teaching. It ensures that client care and safety are maintained within the counseling relationship, allows you to give timely feedback, and facilitates monitoring of how recommendations are implemented. As one of the most effective methods for developing skills, observing trainee performance also supports consistent quality care as well as professional growth. As observation is one of the foundations for training, it can be accomplished in a number of ways. Obviously, in person is the best scenario in which you can sit in attendance in an individual or group setting with the trainee. But it also can be accomplished using teleconferencing or telesupervision. However, you must ensure that either the trainee has a competency to conduct this session individually, or that there is another professional LAC in the room with the trainee. Another strategy is to record sessions. This is an excellent way of training in that you can see how the trainee is progressing in the session, and yet you can make suggestions or give feedback without the interference of the progression of the session and without interfering in the care for the client. Always follow through with not only observing the session, but how the trainee is documenting the activities from their sessions. A way to improve your observation skills is by slowing down. In other words, you pace yourself for processing information. As a clinical supervisor, train yourself to pay close attention to surrounding what is said, what is not said, body language, etc. If the trainee is struggling or has not had the proper experience in supervision, we may need to increase observation. Perhaps do joint groups or joint work. Pair the trainee with another person, with another supervisor or another peer before they're able to work independently. Clinical supervision involves a significant commitment to teaching and guiding the trainee. Didactic sessions can cover a wide range of topics, including counseling approaches, methodologies, strategies, and evidence-based practices. An important aspect of supervision is helping the trainee identify their strengths as well as areas of challenge, collaborating to provide support and offering suggestions for addressing those challenges. It's essential to ensure that the trainee does not simply shadow you or replicate your counseling style, technique, or strategies. Instead, the goal is to help them develop as a professional, cultivating their own clinical skills grounded in evidence-based practice. Supervision should provide opportunities for the trainee to practice the application and implementation of knowledge in a safe and supportive environment, such as through role-playing exercises or practice sessions with their peers. This hands-on approach allows trainees to gain confidence, refine their skills, and develop their professional judgment while learning to adapt evidence-based strategies to real-world clinical situations. When supervising your trainees, several considerations can enhance their learning experience. Written assignments such as reflections, readings, or webinars can help trainees process and internalize knowledge. Modeling counseling with clients allows them to observe effective techniques in real-world settings, while role plays and demonstrations of both effective and ineffective strategies can teach methods and skills in a practical way. Co-therapy sessions and serving as a role model provide additional opportunities for trainees to learn through observation and participation. It's important to remember that trainees will ask questions, including why questions, and this should not be taken as disrespect. They're seeking to understand and learn. Frequent feedback is essential as trainees often do not know what they do not know. So remember, encourage questioning. In addition to teaching, you become a mentor for your trainee. You give them the support that they need to help them develop the confidence necessary to develop a sense of professional identity. Mentoring is a collaborative relationship in which experienced, knowledgeable, and supportive clinicians guide trainees in developing their skills, shaping their professional identity, and clarifying their long-term career goals. This process can be achieved by mutually agreeing to work towards designated goals, understanding the value of those goals, and setting achievable objectives and priorities. Mentors help trainees recognize areas of competency while supporting the development of critical thinking and problem-solving skills. Effective mentoring also involves observing the trainee's performance, providing constructive feedback, and reinforcing learning through repetition, creating a structured and supportive environment for professional growth. The bottom line is, make yourself available. Trainee autonomy refers to the degree of independence and self-direction that a trainee is encouraged and empowered to exercise in their professional growth and clinical practice. It's a critical component of effective training as it fosters confidence, critical thinking, problem-solving abilities, and the capacity to make sound clinical judgments. Supporting autonomy allows trainees to take ownership of their learning, practice decision-making, and develop a sense of professional responsibility. However, the level of autonomy provided should be carefully calibrated to the trainee's developmental stage, their experience, and their demonstrated competencies, ensuring that they are challenged appropriately without being placed in situations that exceed their current skills or risk client safety. When balanced correctly, autonomy encourages growth while maintaining a structured, supportive environment where trainees can gradually build independence and professional judgment. Probably one of the most critical and intimidating issues to consider is that you are a role model for your trainee. As a result, you need to keep in mind how you present yourself at all times, how you follow laws and ethical standards, how you set boundaries, follow the laws of confidentiality, and prioritize your relationship with your trainee. And hey, let's not forget about self-care. Clinical supervisors serve as role models by demonstrating professional behavior, ethical practice, clinical reasoning, and interpersonal skills in real-world settings. Through observation, trainees learn how to engage with clients, make evidence-informed decisions, and navigate complex clinical and ethical situations. Effective supervisors articulate the reasoning behind their actions, reflect openly on challenges, and model self-care and professional boundaries. This approach encourages trainees to develop their own professional identity, to integrate ethical and culturally responsive practice, and cultivate competence and confidence rather than simply replicating the supervisor's style. If you're new to the field of clinical supervision, I recommend that you interview other clinical supervisors, counselors, and trainees. Find out what they value, what they see as detrimental to clinical training, as well as approaches and strategies that have worked well for them. We will be evaluating your trainee as prescribed by the state standards and your training consortium requirements. There will be formal evaluation as well as informal evaluation in which you give and receive feedback with your trainee. But also the evaluation includes you as a clinical supervisor. How have you progressed? What concerns do you continue to have? What are the resources available? And how best can you progress? Clinical supervisors are responsible for creating a safe, supportive space where trainees can explore cases, discuss challenging or uncomfortable topics, and reflect on their clinical work without fear of judgment. This includes regular discussions of their projects, any obstacles they're facing, and ongoing monitoring of their interactions with clients, including observing client responses to the trainee. You must ensure the safety of both your trainee and the client, considering potential risks in today's clinical environment. This also involves establishing clear boundaries around social media use and the implications of client access to personal information. Trainees should always be encouraged and given permission to share concerns or seek guidance as they arrive. So yes, there will be challenges. Supervisors should be aware of potential challenges in their relationship with trainees, including maintaining appropriate professional boundaries and avoiding roles as a friend, parent, or therapist. It's normal for trainees to test limits, especially early on, as they navigate expectations and inherit the power differential in the supervisory relationship and the inherent power in the supervisory relationship. Supervisors should set realistic expectations for both themselves and their trainees, recognizing that trainees often want to prove themselves and gain approval. This desire can make it difficult for them to raise concerns, disagree, or ask for help when needed. So creating a supportive and open environment is essential. If supervision is not occurring as intended, it's important to revisit the original supervision contract and clarify expectations. When the supervisory relationship is strained or broken, it's the clinical supervisor's responsibility to address the issue directly. This may involve discussing the value of the working relationship, exploring each person's perception of the relationship, consulting with peers for strategies, and identifying the specific challenges. You should seek guidance when needed and recognize that in some cases, the best course of action may be to refer the trainee to another qualified supervisor. Be open to reviewing your expectations as a clinical supervisor and consider whether adjustments are needed for yourself or your trainee. Reflect on whether you have allocated sufficient time to achieve your supervisory goals and make any necessary changes to ensure both effective supervision and professional growth for your trainee. Don't forget that there are administrative responsibilities that go along with clinical supervision. That can mean reporting to your agency on the progression of your training with your trainee, the progression of treatment for your client, and ensuring that they're getting quality care. It means ensuring that documentation is completed and that the trainee is knowledgeable on the medical and electronic record that you use. Keep in mind that if the trainee is coming from another treatment program, they may need to learn your system for electronic documentation. The State Licensing Board, as well as the Training Consortium, have standards and requirements for documentation, so give yourself time to complete the necessary records. And lastly, always make sure your trainee, as well as yourself, are following and in compliance with the policies and procedures of your agency, as well as the ethical standards as designated by NADAC and the laws of North Dakota. So as we conclude this training module, I invite you to reflect on your strengths as a clinical supervisor, the challenges that you're experiencing, and how to garner the support and resources you feel necessary to be a successful clinical supervisor. One way to accomplish this is by keeping a journal as you go through this journey in the development of your clinical supervisory skills. At the end of most of the training modules, there will be questions or statements to help you reflect for yourself on your growth and development. Finally, a reminder, we need to ensure that we never put our clients in a situation where they're not safe, and that we not put trainees in a situation in which they are not prepared or competent. It is a journey, and again, I congratulate you on taking on this responsibility and this challenge. It can be a very positive experience, and it's important for the workforce as we become more competent, as we become more innovative, as we reach out to those individuals that need our help. And don't forget, you're working with another individual, so please enjoy it and have fun.